Welcome to the first ever CAN Data and Research Roundup. Um, and I'm Raul Alvarez, I'm Executive Director, and I'm joined by Carlos Soto, who's our Data Research and Planning and Evaluation Coordinator, and Jolina Tunstall, who's our Program and Operations Coordinator. So thanks to them for taking on a new kind of engagement, opportunity for CAN. And And again, I'm Raul Alvarez, Executive Director, and this is actually our 30th anniversary for CAN. So that's why we're kind of trying some new things and trying to kind of step outside our usual comfort zone, right? Around um, what we typically do to year, although data and research is in our comfort zone, as you all know, but we always want to again try to figure out what we can do differently with that data so that we can get it out to the community and to stakeholders and partners, right, to use. And this is actually the 15th version of the dashboard. We'll be sharing the 2024 dashboard, and um, and we're gonna publish. Let's see. So this is and the dashboard is actually divided into four sections. And this morning we'll be covering two sections, and then this afternoon we'll cover another two sections because again, usually we take a whole hour to present on the dashboard, but and that's kind of pushing it too based on all the information. So we're kind of dividing it up and kind of trying to link it with the other presentations for morning and afternoon sessions. And I will be assisted by Carlos Soto in that endeavor. And um, and just before we get into the nuts and bolts of our presentation, I will note that, again, I mentioned already this was the 15th edition, the 2024 version. So very soon, I think November 12th, actually, no, you see on the slide there, November 12th at 10 a.m., we will release the 2025 CAN dashboard. So that's the 16th edition. And then one last time, because I know I see several of our dashboard steering committee members that are present here and who will be presenting right throughout the day, is that we do have a dashboard steering committee of data and research professionals, from CAN partner organizations, but also from other stakeholder organizations with whom we work very closely. And so if your organization or you are a data professional, right? Or if your organization has a data professional and you want to be a part of the dashboard steering committee, let us know. It's a great sort of a learning space where we talk about the dashboard, but also share information about the research and information that's now available. And that's partly what we're doing today is kind of making sure that research that we know about that's useful to us can also be useful to you all. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started with our portion of this first presentation of the morning session, which is a presentation of the 2024 CAN dashboard report. And I'll pass it to Carlos for that, and I'll mute myself so that you don't hear me. If I can do it, let's see. Are
Thank
you
you,
ready to roll,
Raul.
Carlos? Go ahead.
Yes,
And I'll
I
manage the people joining while you're doing that.
I think Jolina is able to
Oh,
manage those
excellent.
at
Thank
this
you.
point. Yes, I've
Appreciate
been
it.
communicating with her via text, but I'm just gonna focus on presenting now since I know that you all can hear me. So this report is gonna cover information from the 2024 CAN dashboard updates, and we do have a release of updated data coming out next month. So by next month and further into the fall and winter, if you go visit our website, you'll see updated data. That being said, the next slide will show CAN's mission. Next slide, please. Okay, there's a mission, which is we are a government, we are a partnership. That's the basis of our existence between government, nonprofit, private and faith-based organizations, and we all leverage our resources, mu mutual resources, and we try to work collectively to improve social health, education, and economic opportunities in our community. And those are the basis of that's what economic mobility is built on, are key factors from those fields. So the next slide will show our partners, and our partners come from a wide variety of organizations and sectors, including government, education, transportation, health, workforce, higher education, economic development, and especially collaborative and philanthropic organizations. And you can see what that means. We means that local colleges and community colleges work together with chambers of commerce and the school districts and other organizations that work to train and prepare people to be productive members of our community. So together, we all find that our work is done better when we are informed and when our community is informed. And so when you land on our website, canatx.org, this is what it looks like. And those buttons will take you to different tools we've developed to help the community stay informed and connected and active. So the first button is to the dashboard, and we're gonna get into that in a minute. But the other three buttons are also important because you can subscribe to our newsletter with that second button, and the newsletter lets you know about events that are occurring, important information, and it's a weekly newsletter. So it's really helpful to stay up to date on what's going on. The opportunity map and the podcast are also excellent tools. The podcast is connected to our events calendar. So partners and other local events are shared there. Partner events and other local events are shared there. And the opportunity map kind of is an important tool for economic mobility tool. But we're here to talk about the dashboard. So the next slide will show what happens when you click on that dashboard button. You land on the website, and on the top menu, that second link there that says download report, that's where you can download the community dashboard report, which provides an overview of the conditions that these indicators cover. So it's a kind of a condensed version of what you'll find if you visit the website and visit each individual drill down, because there's only so much we can include on a single page, right, for each one of these indicators. So we encourage you that if you've seen the report before but haven't visited the website and visited the drill downs, please do so. So the dashboard and the drill downs are divided into four main issue areas: safety and justice, basic needs, health, and achieving full potential. And that's the one that covers employment and unemployment and the education indicators that we track in partnership with E3 Alliance. And so um, together, these the indicators kind of help paint a picture of if we're headed in the right direction, so that everybody in our community can, live full, productive, fair, just lives. And so important considerations, I guess, or key takeaways about our dashboard, and I think it's two slides down. Yeah, are that these community-wide indicators, I mean, they provide excellent, good, excellent, and useful and important data, but they don't tell the full story. And so that's why the drill downs disaggregate by race, sex, age, and any other type of subpopulation that the data are available for. And so that's why it's important to take a closer look at the drill downs in on the website, and especially since the youth in our community are such a diverse population. There's such a wide a great number of different identities involved with youth. And so addressing racial inequality is really important for the future of our community. And there are demographic shifts occurring uh, and affecting economic indicators as much or more as efforts to address these challenges. So there's a lot of work on the challenge on the barriers to economic mobility, but changes in demography are making it are contributing to the complexity involved in addressing the issues. So, and we are still witnessing changes due to pandemic era shifts in demographics and economic impacts from the the pandemic. And so that shows in our under 18 population, uh, when you look at it, it's over 60% of it are people of color or non-white. But when you look at the population that's 65 and older, it's almost flipped around. And so that's part of what contributes to the complexity because needs are different across ethnicities, cultures, and identities. And so, and ages too. And so, yeah, that just means we have to work smarter. And so that's where data comes through. And so the percent of Travis County children, especially living below the poverty level, the the disparity between the groups is much greater for child poverty than it is for adult poverty or non-child poverty. So that's an important um, consideration when we're thinking about economic mobility. So I think we have some questions in the chat, but I'm going to continue on uh, with the changing economic landscape that we're seeing because about 21% of people living in the five county MSA were low income in 2022, which is defined as living in a household where the total earnings are twice the federal poverty level or the federal poverty threshold. In 2022, low income households would have been making $59,356 for a family of four, of two parents and two children, and $47,156 for a family of three with one adult and two children. And so when we look over the past 10 years from 2012 to 2022, the metropolitan statistical area constituted by the five counties that include Travis County and Bastrop, Caldwell, Hayes, and Williamson, the low income population uh, changed their from 87,000, or I mean, it declined by 87,000 or 15% over those 10 years, but the population grew dramatically. And so when we compare the surrounding counties to see how populations changed, um, we can see that some interesting patterns because in Williamson County, the low income population changed. It only dropped by 1%, while in Travis, it dropped by 25%, right? But in Bastrop, for example, the population increased by the low income population over the 10 years from 2012 to 2022 increased by 53%. So there's population changes, but they're not happening the same throughout the MSA. So this is just one small example of why it's important to disaggregate. If we look at the number from the MSA, we say, oh, there's a 15% reduction in low income population. But when we take a closer look, we see that some of the counties are gaining low income population while others are losing, and some are losing at a faster rate than others. And so this map shows the concentrations of low income. So up to about 30% is the lightest blue. Census tracts that have 31% to 50% of their population with living in households with low income is medium blue, and the dark blue shows where more than half of the households or the individuals live below the low income, which is twice the poverty level. And so Raul will go ahead and discuss some more of the indicators that are of particular interest to economic mobility. Thanks for the wonderful introduction, Raul.
Thanks, Carlos, for giving us that overview. And we kind of start with that demographics profile just so that we see that it affects the numbers that we see, right? The outcomes that are measured by the different indicators in our dashboard report. And again, this is kind of what our main website looks like for the dashboard drill down. And you can, the dashboard report has, maybe 40 slides on it, right? And charts. If you play around in our drill down in more interactive version of the dashboard, there's probably over 100 charts and data shared. And hopefully we'll get into that a little bit. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the first couple of sections of the dashboard. You see there's four. We are safe, just, and engaged. Our basic needs are met. We are healthy. We achieve our full potential. And so our morning sessions kind of tend to be more about the basic needs. So we're going to focus on the first two uh, categories or sections, and then we'll cover the second two in our first presentation this afternoon. And just a little more about our um, the structure of the dashboard. We do have um, we do share kind of the most recent data that we have, and again, keep in mind this is a 2024 dashboard. A lot of our information is census information, right? And there's about a 2-year lag before we get that. So that's why the most recent data point here is around 2022. And in the dashboard we'll release right in November, you'll have more of the 2023 numbers. But it's difficult to glean anything from a single data point, right? So we don't just share the most recent data we have. We start with a 5-year baseline, which you see is the first column there. And then we do have set a target working with our kind of community stakeholders and our dashboard steering committee. And using that data, we kind of track the trend over the 5 years, kind of how's it going, better, worse, or kind of steady. And then given that trend, are we on track to meet the target? And so you see the arenas where, again, we're not on track and the trend is not good is, in terms of violent crime and disproportionality of jail bookings. And actually the last gubernatorial election, we actually saw a decrease, right? So again, so I think that the structure, it's important kind of to know that's what it is. I'm just going to give an example of sort of what the main chart looks like um, for one of the indicators. And so this is what in our dashboard report, if you download it, this would be what you see for kind of the property crime rate. It'll show you obviously not just the numbers and not just the little dashboard symbols, but it'll also show you kind of the trends over the 5 years. And you see here the red in this particular instance is Travis County, and you see how it kind of property crime kind of peaked in 2019 and kind of went down from there a little bit. And in 2022 started to see kind of a slight increase in that 1 year. And it's hard to make predictions on 1 year's worth of data. So again, that's another one where if you saw a change and you want to look forward to the 2023 number to see, is that a trend or is it just kind of a blip in the data? And then this is kind of the same sort of page from our dashboard for violent crime, right? And so you see kind of what the trend is for violent crime, and that did peak, during the pandemic in 2020, and it's kind of remained steady through 2022. So again, it's another one to see what that does in 2023 when we release the report in November. And again, here is our dashboard page for the basic needs section, and you'll see here again. You have the 5-year baseline, the most recent number we report, and then we have our target and 5-year trends, um, and so you see that for food security, right, is where we see that from 2018 to 2022, we saw an increase. So obviously that's not trending in the right direction, and we're not going to be on track to meet our goal. Although I guess we have the goal for 2025 that was set 5 years ago, and so we actually have met that, but we're not trending in the right direction if that persists, right, for another year. And then the bottom one, which is number of people identified as homeless on a given day, and so also again kind of going up, so we're not trending in the right direction. So again, this is a dashboard, so you try to kind of see what is actually lighting up right on the dashboard as something to pay attention to. And I'll just do since our presentation is going to be around food security coming up. Um, just share what the dashboard shows on food security, right? And the trends over the 5 years. And there you see again, Travis County is the red line. And you see kind of what it did during the pandemic. And it actually went down following the pandemic because of all the food support uh, that was provided during the pandemic. And then when that support goes away, well, then you see what tends to happen. And again, it would be interesting to see from 2021 to 2022, right? It looks like it's not quite a trend because it's just one data point, right? So you'd want to look at the 2023 number to make sure, again, that if that's holding or if it's not holding. And I'm sure we'll learn more in our next presentation about that. And here's something that Feeding America, who's our source for this data, also does break it down by race. And so you see that there is sort of a gap in food access, right, by race. And so that's just some of the things that we share in the dashboard, and we could go on and on and on and on. But um, before we go any further, yeah, we'll go ahead and take some questions. We don't have a lot of time, but we'll check the chat for questions, and then we'll kind of get prepped for our first sort of deep dive into one of the subjects. And any Carlos or Jelena, any questions in the chat? Okay.
There's nothing in the chat.
All right.
I
I
spoke too
think
soon. Okay, so from Brian, we have, can we determine how much the low income household trends we see are tied to economic displacement in Austin?
I think it's difficult to really glean, right? Exactly. But I think what we'll say is, or what is suggested in the data, right, is because if you see for Travis County, right, it was a decrease of 25%, which is almost 100,000 uh, people reduction, right, in low income individuals or households. But you see in the folks who had an increase in those numbers, right, low income families, which is just Bastrop, only had an increase of 14,000, right? So that doesn't account for the decrease, right, in Travis, Williamson, and Hayes, which suggests that some folks may be moving right out of the region, but also you might have an influx, of people again could also be right, increasing their income. That's another possibility. And so I think those are some of the things to factor in. We can't say like for sure, but it seems like there are a lot of households we can account for, at least within the MSA, right? And just keep in mind that Caldwell is in here in this particular chart because it doesn't meet the reliability standards, in terms of the reliability of the data. So I think that's one of the reasons you don't see Caldwell there. So there could be some going into Caldwell, but some may be going even outside of the 5 county region. And I see Stephanie had a hand up.
Yes, sorry. So, and just to be clear, what we're looking at now is through the end of 2022, and in November, we expect to see data that captures 2023 information. Is that
Yes,
right?
I believe, and Carlos can correct me if I'm wrong. Carlos updates both the map and this chart right here. Yeah. You might chime
And I was
in.
also specifically asking about the public safety data. It's through 2022 is what was on that screen.
Yes,
That's right.
we'll have the 2023 numbers, and we use the census population numbers, right? To compare, in terms of figuring out the crime rates, and that's why we have that kind of 2 year gap. But I think there is data that's more recent around crime. We just, to be consistent, we kind of use the same methodology, right, every year so that we can actually compare numbers across years. So, but yeah, we'll have that as well soon. And again, if you have if you have some kind of deadline and you need more recent data, feel free to reach out because we have it. It's just we're trying to finish up with all the report writing, checklists that one must go through. But if you're in a jam and need some information that's more recent, please reach out, and if we have it, we'll share it. So, alrighty. Any other questions? Well, we'll stop because we're at 10:30, and this is our first run at it, so we didn't have as much time for Q&A, and even we're gonna dig into the drill down, which if you're data geek like me, you can just play around with the data, for hours and hours. So, but we don't have hours and hours, so we'll say thank you to y'all for letting us share a little bit about the dashboard. We'll share a little more this afternoon at 1 o'clock about the health and achieving our full potential sections. But we'll go ahead and pass it off to Mia Berger, who's with the Central Texas Food Bank, and she also serves on our dashboard steering committee. That helps us with an annual review of the dashboard every year because we, want to look at it to make sure that everything is accurate and it's still, and if there's any gaps that we kind of address the gaps, as we see them and as we find them. And so thanks to Mia and to all of our dashboard steering committee members. I see quite a few that are here. And we'll go ahead and hand it off to Mia for the next presentation. And I assume Carlos and Mia have worked out how the sharing of the information is going to work. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm just gonna share my screen here. And actually, we're going to have our Director of Research, Laura Gougeon, is going to kick us off here. So is everyone seeing that full screen presentation? Great. All right, so I'll hand it over to Laura.
Thank you, Mia. Well, yeah, I'm crashing in. Definitely, like Mia is the star of the conversation and behind a lot of the data that you're gonna see today. But I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to also talk a little bit about of the looking at food insecurity, but even beyond. One of the things that we saw is like how Travis County is embedded around many other types of trends of data, right? And they're not disconnected. Things happen in a system. And so a lot of the things that we are gonna be, and Mia gonna be sharing a little bit later after my introduction, is looking at those regional trends. Yeah, so you can pass that one, Mia, please. Yeah, one more. Thank you. So just a reminder of this, you all know this very well, but the Central Texas Food Bank, we do cover 21 counties. So Travis County is the major of our region, actually. I would say test my numbers here. Just don't quote me on that. About more than 50% of the population that we serve is actually in Travis County, but it is twice the size of Massachusetts area that we need to cover. And so we are the largest hunger relief organization in the region, and we partner with over 250 community organizations to be able to do this. So we do not do this alone, right? And as it was mentioned, like, so food security is our focus. It's hunger relief in the sense that it's an immediate food assistance, right? Like, you know, the expression, like you feed someone a fish and feed them for a day. That's a lot of what we do. It's like that immediate food assistance as a hunger relief. But we do know that food security is something that requires more of that constancy. It's a constant reliance, right? The consistent access to enough food to live an active and healthy life. And so with that lens, I'm going to speak a little bit about how, not so much with the hunger relief actions that we do, but how we try to move things more upstream to really tackle food security, not just hunger. So food security, food insecurity trends, it is rising. Raul, you mentioned it already really well, right? Like it's on the rise. One of the challenges we are having right now is that the data that we rely quite a bit on from USDA to learn about the trends in food security is no longer. So it was pulled out of the USDA. It's not going to do that survey anymore. So Feeding America does have its own way of also calculating community level estimates of food security. So there's a lot of conversation of how we're going to continue to look for that particular trend, right? This very important metric of how our community fare in terms of equitable food access. We do know it is increasing. So Central Texas, we are close our local numbers, so we do have our own calculations to look more specifically for our region. We estimate that about 18% of Central Texas experience food insecurity. And what you can see here is a lot of that place-based and race ethnicity-based disparities that exist in our region. So even like beyond, if you think of Travis County, it tends to be like, you know, look at some of the poverty numbers, right? And you could look at it as faring well, but it was a very interesting question of what does that mean from like Travis reducing and increase, like reducing poverty to other regions? And we can see that how it also trends across the region in terms of the food insecurity rates and how everything's interconnected. So our north region and to the east tend to experience higher rates of food insecurity. So we do see that place-based disparity. And if you drill even further, you're going to see even more differences in the areas of food insecurity rates. Race, ethnicity, I think that goes without saying, right? How much more of the Black and Latino and Hispanic population are much larger proportion of the population experience food insecurity when you compare to white Caucasian population. If next one, please. And so this is like a well-spirited way that we like to show and speak about like how we see food insecurity as a food bank, right? In the city of the downstream, lots of people in the river and probably already very familiar with either with this comic of the idea of downstream and upstream. But if we can continue like trying to have all this system of the lifeboats and hospitals, but people will continue to need the food assistance. So how is it that we move things and mobilize community and use data to inform actions and solutions upstream while also providing the downstream support, right? So the upstream trying for the root causes and the downstream while we're still needing to patch our food system and our unfair food access reality. So the next one, please. So this is our mission vision, again, just centering a little bit of what we do and bringing up that it's just not that direct access to nutritious food that we envision the Central Texas Food Bank role in the community, but also the resources that are necessary for people to access food on their own, giving that, you know, dignity and agency and access the food that they want and they need on their own. And the next one, Mia, please. And so this is where a lot of the things we've been doing more recently is looking at incentives, how we can support the local and regional food system through a food hub, through our community, our partnerships. And so a lot of that supporting thinking of all these levels of the food system, and Mia is going to be speaking about some of the data and regional trends on each of these areas of the food system, is through the data and research. So what kind of trends and metrics that we can aggregate to then mobilize and share that back with communities, like Rosh said in the beginning, right? Like inform and really empower, allow them to feel empowered to make decisions based on that evidence. And one thing that is really interesting in our approach too is that the food access is seen as this result, as the outcome of acting in the food system. So if we work on the food system through food production, food distribution, right? The market, retail markets, and access. Food access, equitable food access will result, right, as an outcome of that. And so then the next one, Mia. So some of the data assets that we've been generating and working for this work to inform not just the immediate access for where the programs are, the distributions, where the population who is more experiencing food insecurity is located, and being able to inform all of that, but also again inform those solutions upstreams with the community and the partners that we have, is the food access convening tool. So we call EFFECT. Is this aggregated data for each of the counties that we serve to look at the main root causes or the different, I hate to use this term, but like risk factors for food security, right? Like where we look at the different kinds of population, race, ethnicity, and some of like the kind of the profile of that county that is linked to their food security numbers. The electronic client intake data. So a lot of the partners that are with us for the food distribution, they collect data on the neighbors with the community members coming to the food distributions. So we can see again that disparities, the place space, where do they come from? When people need food, they don't see county lines. And that's where you can see here from Travis County, like how people come from all over the region to receive food assistance in Travis County. Like, so the darker areas, like showing where most of the assistance is provided. And also we would look at the disparity, race, ethnicity, with the darker bars, for example, here showing the number of the population that is that identified with that particular race and ethnicity. The middle green being the food insecurity rates for that race and ethnicity. And then the lighter green is the access to food assistance. So we can see how like the Hispanic population, they are accessing at a particular rate, but others may not necessarily. So we use all of that to make informed decisions for our programs. But now to Mia, oh, and then we have few more, sorry. And then two more. So the two main ones that's actually going to inform the trends that you're going to see, that Mia is going to speak about, is the Central Texas Food System Dashboard that links a lot of the publicly available data and aggregate it for our region. We can sort it by counties and look at different types of information metrics. And the numbers do not tell the whole story. And so the experiences on the ground are collected and shared through our food access community needs assessments, and we do it by counties. So for Travis County, we just wrapped it up. Our report has been just released over the summer, and it actually sheds some light into that question about the changes and kind of like exporting poverty, and the shifts around the economy as well, like some very interesting perspectives from the ground. And so the trends that Mia is going to share now, it brings a lot from the light green ones. Yeah, now to Mia. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Laura. So as Laura mentioned, I'm going to be talking mostly about data that we have housed on our food system dashboard, which is mostly secondary data from federal and state sources, and then kind of helping to contextualize that with mostly data from our food access community needs assessments. So I'll warn you, these slides have a lot on them. It's kind of going to be drinking from the fire hose, but we know you're all here because you love data, and we're going to be sharing this presentation afterwards so you can spend a little time with it, and hopefully we'll have time for plenty of questions. So zooming out first, what we've really seen from our food access community needs assessments are these kind of system-wide challenges that aren't necessarily unique to the food system or unique to our area, but they're really shaping food insecurity and the food system. So rapid population growth is probably not a surprise to anyone, but this has a lot of impacts on infrastructure. So just seeing how population growth is outpacing things like grocery stores and public transportation. Natural disasters and extreme hot and cold are really big challenges for agricultural production, as well as worker safety and the resilience of our communities. And then transportation is a really big barrier for a lot of neighbors experiencing food insecurity. And even thinking about those kind of as folks move across borders and as high like county borders, as the cost of living is different in different parts of our service area. We see that sometimes those transportation budgets can really get eaten up, or at least are reserved for commuting to work. So that leaves less for getting to a grocery store that may not be very close by. So starting with what is usually considered the first sector of the food system, where it all begins, is food production. So it might not surprise you, with all that development and population growth going on, that farmland is decreasing overall across Central Texas. So the really dark green counties in that map on the right-hand part of the slide are the ones that have lost more than 10% of their farmland in the last 10 years alone. So that's the whole Austin MSA, as well as a few other counties. Then actually in the northern part of the Central Texas region, those counties have seen an increase, which goes counter to the overall trend, counter to the overall national trend. So we can already see there could be some ways to kind of leverage our whole region to address some of these barriers. And then just a quick snapshot of what the 9 million acres of farmland are being used to grow in Central Texas. It's a little less than 3% is used for growing crops that are for immediate human consumption. So about 0.5% goes to what are usually called specialty crops, so fruits, vegetables, and nuts. And then really the lion's share, almost 8 and 10 acres, are used for raising livestock. So community insights around food production, also related to that population growth and development, increasing costs for producers, especially for land. And that's what's illustrated by the quote on this slide. And so a lot of the strategic opportunities that are coming up around food production have to do with how to preserve farmland. So things like zoning and adjusting tax policies are some of the things that have come up in our stakeholder interviews, for example. The food environment is a really huge piece of the puzzle when we're thinking about the food system and food insecurity. And what I want to highlight here is really that, unfortunately, we can consider our whole 21 county service area a food swamp. There are over 7 times as many convenience stores and fast food restaurants as there are grocery stores. So the threshold for being considered a food swamp is 3.5 times as many. So we've gone past that threshold by a factor of 2. So we've heard a lot from neighbors and stakeholders about the food retail and food retail environment. So what's really closely linked to that is actually a lot around federal benefits like SNAP and WIC. So that's what those quotes illustrate. We've heard a lot about not being able to find a place to use SNAP benefits, especially in rural areas, and it's even more limiting for WIC. So the strategic opportunities around that are really, first of all, trying to connect more neighbors to SNAP and WIC, and offering SNAP and WIC at helping more retailers and a more diverse array of retailers be able to accept SNAP and WIC benefits. Food expenditures kind of go along with that piece about food retail and the food environment. So how much folks are spending. And looking at the secondary data on this, what really struck us is the disparity in how much low-income households are spending on food versus wealthier households. So this chart shows that the bottom 20% of, I shouldn't say bottom, folks who are in the lowest quintile of income are spending more than twice as much of their income as a share of their income as the other 80%. So people earning the lowest amounts are spending 17% of their income on food, which is well above the overall average in the country of around 12%. And we've also noticed that there are some rural disparities going on. So in rural counties, just thinking of this as kind of a compounding issue, wages are lower and they're also having to spend a lot more money on food and having fewer options of where to even spend it. So we did hear a lot from neighbors about affordability as well, and especially being able to afford food that is culturally relevant and meets their needs health-wise. So a lot of the strategic opportunities around this are not necessarily related to the affordability of food directly, but being able to help folks get food that is going to help them manage things like chronic illness. Half of neighbors in our neighbor survey have at least one household member with a chronic illness. So scaling things like food as medicine through things like medically tailored meals and produce prescriptions came up as opportunities to help get more of that nutritious food into the hands of people who are having the most trouble affording it. So the last piece of this is the last piece of data that I really wanted to share with you is kind of where the food system usually is considered to end, so food waste. You could also see it as kind of starting the cycle of compost and things being put back into food production. So I'm mentioning this not because we have some really amazing data to share, but because we don't, and there is a huge interest in it. We hear from everyone that they want to tackle food waste, they want to learn more about it, and we just haven't been able to find a really robust data set that's available at the county level or state level. Nationally, we have a little bit more of an idea of where food waste is coming from, which is mostly homes and the food service sector. What we do have data on that's related to this part of the food system is food recovery data. So Central Texas Food Bank and organizations like Keep Austin Fed keep track of what kinds of food they're rescuing, where they're getting it from. And so speaking for Central Texas Food Bank, almost all of this is coming from the retail sector. And you can see that at the national level, there's actually food retail accounts for a lower percentage of overall food waste. So trying to think of how we can actually move the needle more on trying to reduce food waste in other sectors or rescue more from other sectors. So there's just a lot that we don't know about food waste in terms of data. We did hear a little bit about this in our community needs assessments as well. So we do policy scans of all the cities and towns as part of our community needs assessments. And we've found that there's really not a lot of infrastructure for composting. Austin's currently the only city in the CNAs that we've done so far that provides municipal composting services. And we've also heard quite a bit about loss at the farm level, which is another kind of subset of food waste. So really quickly before we get into Q&A, you might be wondering why we have all this data, why we're putting it together like this. And a lot of you have probably heard of our Regional Food System Council by now, but I just wanted to give you kind of an idea of what one of the main audiences of this data is. So we're really seeing this as a way to bring this data into policy solutions, program development, collaboration. So we're serving as the backbone organization for the Central Texas Regional Food System Council. That's going to be launching on October 24th. And we are embedding data in this really at every step. There's a Data and Research Advisory Group that's built into the structure. And the members of that advisory group are academics and food industry researchers. So we really see data as a key part of the mission of the Central Texas Regional Food System Council, and are excited to use this data for data-driven solutions. So we have some links to direct you to certain parts of our dashboard if you want to learn more, and happy to take any questions in the last 5 minutes we have left.
Yeah, and we'll kind of look out for questions, or if you want to raise your hand, we'll call on you. One thing I'll note is, part of the dashboard itself, our CAN dashboard doesn't tell the whole story on these indicators, right? So that's part of the reason why, look, in the dashboard, there's like a blinking red light around food security. And then luckily, or hopefully, we have community partners, right, that are kind of digging deeper into the data to learn how we might kind of intervene and address some of those challenges. So I'll go ahead and, but thank you for that, Mia and Laura. And we do have a couple of questions. I'll go to Lila first and then Leslie.
Good morning, everybody. Just wondering really quickly, your data is something that we get asked about a lot when we're giving presentations on demographics, especially to quality of life commissions. And so I was wondering on your race ethnicity disaggregation, I didn't notice the Asian population. Is that because it's kind of lumped into the other category and so it's not included, or is it a population that doesn't have extreme food insecurity? And then similarly, do you have these types of food insecurity data available, broken down by age groups?
I'll take them, yeah. Yeah, excellent question. So for the Asian population, it is kind of lumped into the other, not that we like it, but it is, I think, much harder. We are noticing, like looking some of the CNAs, for example, that they're not the population that are more impacted or disproportionately impacted by food insecurity. Even in Travis County, like the things that we were hearing is like, oh yeah, the Asian, like there's a few groups. Some groups are, but not all of them. They're very different. And so it is, I think, in terms of the food insecurity, they're not, I'm gonna say, the most impacted by food insecurity experiences compared to others. They are. The challenge is then getting the data, right, to look into that particular population. So we don't zoom in the Asian population groups. And in our service area, we do ask for particular ethnicities, but they're also not the main ones coming to food assistance. Does not mean that they don't need it, right? It may mean that they just don't come. Right? And so it might be one of the things that you hypothesize, and here I'm completely digging as a researcher brain of what could be playing to here, the like values and culture that they tend to be also more neat together and they kind of help each other first before accessing that external help or support. But we do not know. So I'm just sharing a little bit of some of the questions that we asked ourselves related to different ethnicities, races, and ethnicity groups. The data, the second part of your question was about the disaggregation and age, right? So we do look at age. There are some our programs that are more focused on children and families, and some that are more older adults. And some of our fact numbers, like the fact sheet that we showed, for example, they do have it by age as well. How many of the older populations are affected by food insecurity or disproportionately impacted by food insecurity, families and children. So we do see, for example, in Bell counties, the larger number of children experiencing food insecurity in our region compared to other areas. So we do look at by age as well. We just didn't bring it today.
Right. Wait, thank you. And in terms of the CAN data, we get it from Feeding America, so we're sort of just at the mercy of how they break things down. But they do have, I think, food insecurity for children is one. They've had that for a long time, and during the pandemic is when they started reporting food insecurity by race. But we're kind of again, we have to go with whatever breakdowns they use, right? You know, in their data collection or reporting. So, well, we'll just have Leslie and Ara ask their questions, and then we'll transition to our next presenter. Go ahead, Leslie.
Hi, good morning, and hi, Mia. So I have a question. I may have misunderstood when you were talking about food swamps. I think I understood that to mean the percentage of, food places that are, that are not providing access to good food, like convenience stores and fast food restaurants in comparison to like grocery stores, full service grocery stores, that sort of thing. My question is, while I understand that, we often see a pattern of low grocery stores and high, convenience stores and fast foods in, places where there's low access, what happens if there's a place where there's a lot of like there's adequate grocery stores, but there just happens to also be a lot of convenience stores and fast food restaurants? So that would mean there's plenty of access, but would we just compare two data points to kind of make a determination? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so are you thinking more like urban versus rural areas? I mean,
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. It's like,
yeah.
yeah, basically Central Austin has both grocery stores and convenience stores and fast food places. But I don't know what the percentage is, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the percentage is either, but that is a good point. I think it's usually not, I think food swamps are usually used on kind of a smaller scale. And we do this calculation for each county as well. And we found, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, but I think in every county overall, including Travis, we've found that they're food swamps. So the degree of severity might differ, but it's definitely we've definitely seen that those outlets that are providing less nutritious food are massively outnumbering places where you're more likely to be able to find nutritious food. And of course, at the grocery store, you can find all kinds of food. You can find food that is also not health promoting. So it's just kind of one of those indicators that we're using to kind of triangulate what the food environment is in a given area.
Yeah. No, but just adding 2 cents, it's like kind of that contrasting between what would the all formerly known food deserts, right? Low income, low access, and another concept that's the food swamp. So there's a lot of literature and research showing that there's much more of an association, for example, with certain health outcomes like obesity when you look at food swamps versus food access from Lila areas. And as we look for example, Gillespie has no food deserts according to the standard determination of what Lila areas are. But when you look at food swamps, it is a much higher. So it's kind of thinking of in an environment where you're plugged in, what is easier for you to access, right? So, and what is adequate access to grocery stores, right? When you think about that concept, like you really want to make it easy just to access from a distance point to the quality of food that's there. So it's just another way at the environment, like the environmental level, at the community level, to see how easy it would be for someone to, reach that grocery store versus going to a convenience stores that we know that are more likely to serve not so healthy food, right?
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. So like together, right? Like you look at it as a
Mhm.
combination. Excellent question.
Thank you. And Ara, and then we'll transition to our next section. Go ahead, Ara.
Yes, thank you. Uh, have you all been able to put a dollar figure on an annual basis to what it would cost to end hunger in Central Texas? And by ending hunger, I mean closing the calorie gap. So not solving all of the challenges around food deserts and proper nutrition levels, but just getting everybody sufficient calories, uh, how much that would cost our community if we wanted to try to fund it ourselves. I've seen some national figures on this. I saw a group of food pantries and churches that said each church in America would have to raise $50,000 extra per year. That's 300,000 churches. So that at that point it was 15 billion. That figure is probably way out of date. Needs to be updated, but that's a national figure. Is there a way to estimate something similar for Central Texas?
Yeah,
Want me to jump
I
in?
don't know if
Go.
we have that number handy. Do you know, Laura? I know that we do have the
Mhm.
number of meals, like the gap in meals, and then we have average cost of a meal that we include as part of our fact sheet. So I'm guessing they're together somewhere, but it seems like it wouldn't be too hard to calculate from that, and it would be really, an estimate. But
Yeah.
do you have more on that, Laura?
I don't have the numbers. I'm kind of like poking around some of our presentations to see if I can like precise the numbers, but there is, Sarah. So Feeding America together with like Map the Meal Gap, it also shares like Map the Meal Gap, like what would be that gap, that how much it would cost to for all the population experiencing food insecurity and how much is being put out by food banks and how much more like we're missing to fill that gap. And it's at the level of millions. It is not, it depends on the county, like Mia was saying, depending on where you're at. Travis County, we have a lot of the distributions, a lot of partners sharing, like giving away food. And so from that, the gap is a little bit smaller, but from some other regions, it is much wider. I cannot give you the number right now, but there are, if you for Feeding America, and through the conversations, maybe if we can find it, I can just drop it in the chat for curiosity purposes. But yeah, Feeding America tends to lead those calculations about how much it would cost to map to fill that gap, right, between how much is being put out, how many are in need, and how much we need just for the hunger. But we do, and it's a lot. So we cannot food bank our way of the need. I think that's totally something that it's the takeaway from it, whatever number it's gonna be.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you for those
Great
questions,
question.
and Mia and Laura for all that great information, and of course the incredible work y'all do and impact that you have in our community. We're gonna
Go.
transition to our next presenter, which is gonna be around housing. Sort of trends and resources. But we did see a question in the chat about our goals in the dashboard. And actually, I think Mia and Laura, there was a question in the chat we didn't get to. I don't know, you might want to address it in the chat.
Yeah, I saw
Um,
that. I can answer that. Thank you.
but in terms of the goal, I think it was Dr. Valencia who asked you see our target, right, is the goal for a particular indicator. If we have a community partner, like let's say E3 Alliance or Echo or someone else, right, who has a goal set for a particular indicator, we try to mirror those, right, and not sort of have competing goals, so to speak, right, in terms of what particular indicator or outcome we're trying to reach, how we're trying to improve it or to what extent. But if it doesn't, but if that doesn't exist already, then we work with our dashboard steering committee, to set those goals. And usually we'll look at historical trends, right? What's reasonable, right, for us to assume, right, that how quickly an indicator might move. And then another thing we might look at, for some of these indicators, we have comparable cities, right, for which we pull data. And so we might also see, well, what are, if we're at sort of close to meeting our goal, right? Which in some of these instances we are. That doesn't mean we want 15%, let's say in terms of food insecurity, of people to be food insecure. It's just at the time when we set the goal 5 years ago in 2020, right? That seemed like a reasonable goal. And then next year we'll look at updating those goals, right? But we don't want to change the goal, right, or the marker, right, before we get to the sort of the target years, so that again it's not constantly a moving target. So so really most of it happens with our dashboard steering committee, where we kind of go through a process of determining what seems sort of feasible given what's happened historically, and also again what's upon us, what are the trends right now, and whether we should increase or lower a goal, right, for that purpose. Again, just so again, a lot of it is that there's a science to it, but a lot of it is again with 15 people kind of looking at this, sort of what seems to make sense for our committee, because again, we rely on our dashboard steering committee pretty significantly, right, to make sure we presenting accurate data and reliable data and things that kind of hopefully will make sense to the public, right, in some way. So we'll transition. Thank you for that question. And that was our previous presentation, right? Well, thank you again, Mia and Laura, for that very insightful presentation. And we're going to transition to leveraging research to address housing affordability in Austin and Central Texas. We have our friends at Housing Works that are here to present, and I can, and Carlos, you might need to help me here. Do I need to stop sharing so that Awais can share, or do?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that should be it.
Gracias. Thank you all for your patience. I know we're a little behind, but
Yeah,
great
sorry.
questions, everyone. Yeah.
No, thank you, Raul, and thank you all. Excited to be here and listening in, dipping in and out all day through meetings. So I think it's exciting to hear all the conversation. Again, we're Housing Works Austin. My name is Azhar. I serve as the executive director. I'm also joined in the audience by Nick Jackson, who serves as the education manager for Housing Works. And all of the data pieces I'm going to talk about, you can find them on our website at www.housingworksaustin.org. So just in case you want to look through any of it, it is all available there. Just very quickly talking about, so Housing Works, we're a nonprofit organization that's really focused on advancing housing affordability in Austin and Central Texas through research, education, and advocacy efforts. And it was really formed by a group of housing advocates when the 2006 housing bonds were passed. Part of it really being how do we track success of something like that, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the end. So looking at that piece, our moniker that we believe in very, highly is all kinds of homes in all parts of town for all kinds of people. And you'll see this is part of what guides a lot of our research work within that. I'll start off by just talking about like who needs housing that's affordable. So this is data that we're pulling from various different data sources. And the idea is to just look at when we talk about the need for affordable housing in our community, who are we thinking of? Who is it that needs this housing? And you'll see it's really a spectrum of housing needs. So on the far left, we have extremely low income folks. There's nearly 90,000 households that fit this, and these are folks who are earning below 30% median family income or below $40,000 as a household. And this historically, honestly, used to include a lot of people with fixed income, seniors, persons with disabilities. Increasingly, we're seeing childcare workers, waiters and waitresses, food service workers, retail workers are beginning to fit into this category as well. Then there's the category of folks, between that 30% to 60% median family income, and median family income is set by HUD standards. Looking at that, there's a bunch of folks that fall within that, including increasingly firefighters and K-12 teachers. These are all folks who will be eligible for the low-income housing tax credit. Similarly, we have low-income people, and then on the far right, we have moderate income folks. These are folks from 80 to 120%. And although there is no need for subsidized or supported rental housing for this population, we do know that there's a big need for ownership. Really, up to 120% MFI, it is increasingly hard within central Austin to be able to purchase home. And really, it's surprising because this includes folks like nurse practitioners and construction managers, pharmacists, folks with a lot of sort of technical expertise, but we're seeing that those households struggle to find ownership in the community as well. Quickly, I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of Austin at a glance, like what does the data look like for Austin? So we're very proud of the fact that we are one of the communities in the nation with the highest number of income-restricted affordable housing or subsidized affordable housing, essentially housing that is legally bound at a certain income level and then associated rent level as well, or ownership sales level at that point as well, with nearly half of those 28,000 being planned. So these are units that have not currently on the ground, or they've not had the certificate of occupancy. So folks haven't moved in, but they're increasingly in the pipeline. Also looking at cost of living, we see that the average rent per month, this is looking at 2023 data, but this is slightly, more fresh than that, the cost of living piece. But while our median family income was 124,000 in that year, the cost of living remained high as well. So there's, rent is at nearly 1,600. And then we saw that the median home price was below 500 and, around 550, which was lower than what it had been previously. Still significant for a lot of people in our community who continue to struggle. And we can particularly see that with the cost burden data at the bottom left. So what we can see is that while in the state of Texas, and this is one of the data points that CAN is always looking at as well in the dashboard, but we're looking at 31% of folks are cost burden, i.e. they pay more than 30% of their income on housing, and then 14% are extremely cost burden, or they're paying more than 50% of their income on housing. When it comes to the city of Austin, this is actually slightly higher. So the cost burden is higher and extreme cost burden is higher as well. So what we do know is that when nearly 1/3 of your population is paying more than 30% of your income on housing, what's likely going to happen is that they're going to have to cut back on other household needs such as childcare, elder care, healthcare, all of the different things that are necessary to have a thriving home, family, and household. Similarly, we look at poverty and homelessness data. I won't dig into it too much, into too much detail, but really you'll see this is a snapshot of what housing looks like in Austin. Similarly, Housing Works does look at this data at the district level. So in the city of Austin, we have 10 council districts. We look at similar data metrics at the district level. And I'm not going to go into detail of that except to say, again, all of this is available on our website with one tiny caveat that what you can really see through this is that there's a big distinction in what the affordability metrics look like and what part of our community you are. So a perfect example is District 1, that is Northeast Austin, has the most amount of affordable subsidized units at more than 12,000. However, District 10, which is Central West, west of Mopac largely, we see that it's much lower at around 1,300. So those kind of distinctions can be captured here. The other piece that I think is really critical to think about from our perspective is also looking at the counties and the region as a whole. So increasingly, we're looking at data for the region. We have a similar county analysis for the region, and you'll see these tables just sort of pull all the data together. I think just the most important thing I'm going to mention here is that what we really did see is that, yes, home sales price decreased from over 500,000 to 470-ish, which was great. I think that's, looking at relative affordability, particularly for folks trying to enter ownership. Same goes for rent, where we saw a 100% rent drop in our MSA or metropolitan statistical area, which is formed of 5 counties: Bastrop, Caldwell, Hayes, Travis, and Williamson. However, it's really important to think through that while we look at some of those counties, such as, for example, Caldwell, particularly that has much lower home price and rent price, we also see that the median family income is significantly, lower as well. So that's something important to think about. Same goes for cost burden, that it's surprising that even though, compared to Travis or Williamson, Hayes is relatively more affordable. What we do see is that it still has 17% folks are paying more than 50% of their income on housing, which is really high. Similarly, looking at affordable housing numbers, this is again legally restricted housing that's affordable. We really see that Travis County, and particularly City of Austin, has the most number of units that fall within that category. with the next number being Williamson and then Hayes. Overall, we do see that our region does lack a lot of income restricted housing outside of Travis County. For the longest time, of course, we have relied on the fact that if if you cannot purchase a home in the city of Austin or, talking about relative affordability, you look at our surrounding counties and regions and, cities such as Manor, Elgin, Del Valle, Pflugerville, that are relatively much more affordable. However, what we're seeing with commute time is that even though folks might be able to access relatively more affordable housing, their commute time and associated commute costs are going to go up significantly. So overall, a household is not going to gain as much in terms of affordability as they would if there was a central located housing that is affordable to them so that they don't have to have high commute times. I think the most significant thing I just want to mention here is that it's worth noting that 1/5 of residents in Bastrop and Caldwell County are spending more than 60 minutes in commute time. So that's really challenging when you think about it from that perspective. Of course, there's a cost element, but also, it takes you away from your family. It takes you away from your community and all of the other things that a person needs. So we have to think about that. The other thing I just wanted to mention was that, the city of Austin, say our city council, adopted the strategic housing blueprint in 2017, and it set certain goals around affordable housing at different income levels. You can sort of see here in this, chart. What we work on in Housing Works in partnership with the city is actually looking at where are we in terms of our goals associated with those, or where are we in terms of tracking the success against those goals. So simply put, you can see this data again from the latest data that we have. And let's focus on the left side first, which is just looking at how many units do we have in all of those income categories. And it's really important to notice that really what we've seen in the past few years is that 61 to 80% median family income, there has been an increase in market affordability at that level. Again, great news. We're, having relative affordability for the middle income and moderate income folks, which is what we want to see. However, at the same time, we do see that for folks below 30% median family income, that housing, which is almost all subsidized, is really limited still. And of course, it is something where, public participation has to be high. And so we do see that work. Also worth noticing here is that when you look on the right side at the new units built, it's important to think about the fact, and it's not as clear cut because there might be income restrictions, but while that 70% of households at 30% median family income can only access 1% of housing that's affordable to them. When you look at higher income levels, really they have more access because they can access lower income levels as well. So that's something important to think about. Similarly, those goals have there's other kind of goals within the blueprint as well, looking at everything from proximity to high opportunity areas, how much income restricted housing do we have there, how much housing are we building within half a mile of Imagine Austin Center and corridors related to the City of Austin's Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan, looking at how many units are we preserving. So these are market affordable units that we're preserving through some means. This includes both home repair for making sure folks can stay in their communities if they own the home, or rental housing, and then of course permanent supportive housing for unhoused individuals as well. Last thing I'll just talk about and then open it up for questions is really looking at the affordable housing bonds. That's something that, as Housing Works, we continue to take very seriously and track. So this is just an example of 2 projects, but we also try to look at the data associated with that. So, these are explainers. You can again find it on our website. We're trying to create increasingly not only have data, but also how do we share it in a way that's much more accessible to the general public. So we've launched these explainers, and the entire idea behind the explainers is to have really accessible forms of information. So simply put, again, looking at the affordable housing data that we have, and this is slightly old at this point. This is generally true for all of the data. It keeps on going old really fast. But we have nearly 8,000 affordable units have been created through our affordable housing bonds, with nearly 5,000 of those below 50% median family income, which is very significant when you think of that chart. Similarly, we have more than 1,000 for unhoused individuals through permanent supportive housing. We also have over 500 homes for ownership. And then a bunch of different things, including land acquisition, leveraging homes for higher and middle and moderate income folks, and then also over 2,000 households have received home repair. This is largely, honestly, in our community, seniors who own a home but might not have the money to be able to actually maintain it. And largely, what we've seen through that program in our community is what you see actually in this picture, which is making units more accessible so folks can actually age in place. And this includes everything from ramps, widening doors, lowering counters, shower rods, and things like that. At the same time, we also work with, a market research firm looking at the economic impact of our affordable housing bonds. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this is just a reminder to our community and affordable housing advocates as well that while the affordable housing bonds are a key part of producing affordable housing, they're also a big economic engine in our community. So not even the entire bond spend, but 122 million from our previous bonds led to over $1 billion in construction impact in our local community. And this includes everything from 7,500 jobs to workers spending more than 600 million in the local economy. Similarly, there's ongoing annual impact as well. So from 138.6 million of our bond dollars, what we're able to leverage is nearly 100 million each year of ongoing economic impact. And this includes 700 folks employed in this housing as well, including 300 for supportive services for unhoused people and others. Again, just putting it out there as a last piece, just the map, and this is, you'll see it says partial map because, big thank you to the city and our community and our voters who've supported the affordable housing bonds. This map has become so big, we can no longer fit it. We try to struggle with it. All that said, you'll really see that one of the things that we've been able to do is not only have more affordable units to our bonds, but make sure that they're scattered throughout our community so that we're adding more and more of those affordable opportunities throughout our community and city as a whole. I'll stop there, but really the idea was to see how what Housing Works is doing is using data and research and looking at that to leverage more affordable housing advocacy and education around our community. So everything from working with making sure general public knows what their tax invested dollars are getting them, but also, guiding policy decisions on how do we have more affordable housing and housing below 30% median family income and so on. And also at the same time, looking at how do we take some of this information and continue to track our success or lack of success so that we can continue to course correct and advocate for the right needs. I'll stop sharing there so I can look at folks.
Well, thank you, Awais. It's always amazing to see the data that y'all collect and report, and always learn something new, right? In terms of how I should be thinking about some of these things. But a couple questions for me. One is just about again other jurisdictions. I know you all have other jurisdictions besides Travis County, right? For which you report, and then just the interesting for Travis County, or I don't know, City of Austin or Travis County, but oh yeah, I think it was district. Is your district by district analysis? I think you were showing for the city that existing subsidized versus planned subsidized, right? And that subsidized number was pretty significant. If you look at existing 31,000 and planned 29, 28 or 29,000, and just anything you could glean about what's helping with the planned part of that, yeah.
Sure. I think one of the things that's really critical to think about that is, again, we're looking at data. This is, data that we had done for 24, looking back 1 year. We're currently working on data for 2024. All that said, really what we saw was that construction, particularly for affordable housing, slowed down very significantly. So the COVID effect you're seeing there, just such slowed down project pipelines meant that actually some of those projects have taken way longer to come online.
Mm.
Similarly, for a lot of the work that was done on permanent supportive housing, the number looks really small. The pipeline number is triple that. So part of it is, again, those projects got slowed down significantly. That's one thing. The other thing I would really just want to say, we have been really fortunate that our community and our community leaders, elected leaders, chose to use some of the American Rescue Plan Act or ARPA funding for actually producing affordable housing as well. So that actually made a big impact. So we saw such a boost of funding for, legally restricted affordable housing. You're seeing that. So that's part of why our pipeline is really good. On the bad news side, I'll just be honest, I think we're very concerned because a lot of that federal funding, we know we're not going to get it back. The state hasn't provided the funding either. So increasingly, we're relying on our local community to provide those resources. So that pipeline looks great, but we are honestly keeping, a strong eye on that because we are worried that without significant resources, that number will start shrinking pretty fast.
And then just about, and I might have missed it, but just the other jurisdictions for which you maybe report data or
Yeah.
present data.
So particularly looking at essentially the five county regions, so Hayes, Williamson, Travis, Caldwell, Bastrop. In addition, we've increasingly started working with some cities. So we're doing actually a housing assessment for the city of Kyle right now. We just did some data for Taylor as well. That's something we just started 3 years ago. We're trying to build out, but I think we're increasingly seeing that and I know this goes without saying, so many cities and communities in our region don't have a CAN. They don't have someone who's tracking the
Mhm.
data. So they just don't have that basic level of understanding of where things are, and they want to look at that data. So we're trying to provide that support and capacity to these communities. Our hope is, knock on wood, that we'll get to work with Elgin and Manor and some of the eastern communities as well. So while the focus has been very much the north-south 35 corridor, we know that in the eastern part of our region, there's a big need for affordability and addressing those concerns as well.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. We have time for a couple questions. Anybody want to raise their hand or just unmute before we lose our Housing Works folks? Yeah.
I'll just say, I'll tie it in if folks don't have a question. Just, looking at that's one of the things I really do appreciate about the CAN dashboard. And I think the conversations that are happening today is seeing how much of those patterns of affordability and food access and honestly transit access, all of it is so interlinked in our community and really speaks to how we do need to work better in ensuring that those things are aligned, right? I think on the data side, on the research side, yes, it's so significant. There's so much I have to learn from my colleagues, elsewhere about food access or looking at, economic mobility and things like that. For a household, it's all the same thing, right? For them, there's no bifurcation in topics and areas of
Mhm.
expertise. It's lived experience and people are living it every day. And so I think how do we sort of work on combining all of this to better serve Central Texas residents? I think is something we're always trying to think of. It's a challenging thing to think of, but I think something very critical.
Yeah, that's a great point of it, because I think it is it is kind of a social determinants of health approach, but this framework was created before that social determinants of health report started being published, right? At the county level. Um, but uh, but for me, I always thought it was interesting back when this was a page or a printed report, right? It was like 28 pages long. And in like I don't know if it was the centerfold, but you could open it up and see the fourth dashboard areas side by side, right, on one sort of 11 by 17 sheet. And you could actually see, well, this one went up, and then you could see, well, what else went up? I mean, and is there a link between those things or not? You know what I mean? Like that doesn't mean there is. It just kind of is thought provoking in terms of how are these things interrelated, and how is it that when this one indicator moves, like poverty, let's say, well, does food security move? Does housing cost burden move? Does transportation move? And so I do think it's there's so much there in the dashboard. You could like look at it in so many different ways, um, but thank you for saying that, Awais, and also thank you for, I think when I started as ED, he was already involved with the dashboard steering committee, I think as an intern for Housing Works, and then he became the data analyst, and then he became, X, Y, and Z, and now he's the executive director. So congratulations on that journey. And I'll mention that Vanessa Saria said hello in the chat because she was ED when you started your journey with the dashboard steering committee. So So thanks, Vanessa, for all your work. And again, Awais, all our dashboard steering committee members for the support you give us. And because again, it's really hard when you're data folks, sometimes you're just, on your own, right? Especially if you're in a nonprofit, right? People rely on you for so much, right? In terms of to inform the work. But so to be able to connect with other data and research professionals is very important to us and really helps us think about our work. And hopefully, again, that little learning community is useful to you all as well. And again, if you want to be a part of that, just let us know and we'll kind of get you plugged into that as well. So muchas gracias, Neves. Thank you so much. And keep up the great work. And thanks for all you do for our community.
Thank you, Raul. Thank you all.
All right. So that was delivering research to address housing affordability. Again, gracias to Housing Works and to Awais and your team, right? Because I know it's, just like me, if the dashboard relied on Raul to publish, to get it published, it wouldn't happen. So without Carlos and Jolina, the dashboard itself wouldn't happen either. So I know you have a great team behind you as well. And we're going to transition to our last presentation for the morning, and then we'll kind of take a break and come back at 1 o'clock. Our esteemed, I shall say, Dr. Valencia, Lila Valencia from the city of Austin, who has been great to work with and compare notes with. And, it's so excited for you to be in this role, at the city of Austin, and just kind of the excitement and the passion and the energy you bring right to the job. Because, it's, if you get excited about data and research like we do at CAN, then, you get excited when other people get excited about those things as well. So thank you for spending some time with us this morning and for offering to share a little bit of your work, because I know it's so extensive, and you don't just have one boss. Like me, I tell Carlos, can we break the data down in this way and in that way? You have like 20 bosses over there that trying to tell you how you should break down the data. But thank you for being here, and I'll hand it off to you. Bienvenida. Thanks for all you do for us as well.
Thanks, Raul. I'm gonna try to share my slides here. Let me see. Hopefully everyone can see that well. All right.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, so today I'm going to be sharing two tools. I know I told you all I was going to share one. I promise you I'm taking the same amount of time. But I'm really excited for the last one that I'll share with you, which is our Delphi Trends and Imagine Austin forecast. But what I said I would share with you today is the Austin Community Profile Builder. But before I do that, I want to introduce you really quickly to my team. As Raul mentioned, I'm the demographer at the city of Austin. And, previously there was a demographer here. Many of you probably worked with Ryan Robinson in some respect, but he didn't have a team. And one of the things that he did when he left was, really emphasize how important it was to provide some support to this position. Because it is, I have one boss, but the work that we are asked to do is really for multiple stakeholders. It's for the planning department, but for all city departments, for city manager's office, council districts, mayor's office, and then the community as a whole. And so we really do have a broad scope of stakeholders. And so Michael Santulli and Jeff Engstrom and myself are all full-time employees, regular employees. And then I've been able to find some budget help to be able to bring on 2 additional temporary staff, which hopefully will be able to keep them on much longer. It all depends on this whole budget cycle that we're going through. But this is a team, and they are integral to all of the work that I'm going to be sharing with you today. And the work that we do at the city, we serve as the demographic subject matter experts on, methods and research and data analysis. We are in charge of producing and administering key demographic and planning data assets, including our annual population estimates that we produce for the city of Austin, population projections, some zoning and land use tools that we put in place for internal use within the city. And then we also produce in-depth reports and analysis that really summarizes demographic and socioeconomic characteristics and trends for Austin, for the region, for comparison to other peer cities. And so this is where you can get into a lot of those details that are probably much more similar to those 28-page reports that Raul was mentioning the CAN dashboard used to include. And then we also provide presentations, consultation, best practice guidance to different stakeholders across the city and the region. Our website, we have an online demographics hub where we have some real quick stats at the very top where you just want to know the quick population. You can get that from there. You can get the density, things that are just real easy to find. And then we have some more demographic profiles for various geographies. We have some interactive maps and story maps. We have a library with lots of additional resources that include some recent presentations that we've given, some links to other interesting work that is being done at the city. And then we always, if you can't find what you need on our website, we want you to reach out. And so we include a data request form where you can reach out to us and we can provide that information as well. These are our demographic profiles. And the reason that I'm sharing these in particular with you is because, when we first started at the city, people would say, they'd reach out and they'd be like, can you send me the demographics of, this area or the demographics of Austin? And it's like, well, what are the demographics? What does that mean? And we started off by putting together a set of information that we really thought would capture some of what people think of when they say they want demographics. And then we also, through that data request form that we have, we were able to determine what are some of the information that people are looking for, some of the specific things that they're requesting. And so we put together this, it says it's 3 pages here, but the last page is really information on all of the data sources. And so we put together this 2-page demographic profile for the city of Austin, for each of the 10 council districts, for Travis County, and for the metropolitan statistical area. And you can see that it includes information on age distribution, median age, foreign-born population, veteran population, income, different household characteristics, education, employment, and then on the second page, we include additional information. Oh, sorry about that. I went too fast. We include additional information on housing cost, communities of interest that really focus on some populations with increased vulnerability, languages. And so you can see that there's a large array of data that we put together for these different geographies. When we put this information together, we started to get some additional requests, right? And so people wanted to get this same set of demographics, but for their specific custom geography. And so they're like, do you have this for the Riverside area? Or do you have this for this particular corridor that we're looking at? And then in addition, a lot of users aren't necessarily familiar with the census geographies that can make up some of these custom geographies, right? And so we typically work at the census tract level when we're doing more micro data analysis, more granular data analysis. But a lot of users don't know their census tract number, right? And then users also wanted to compare their area of the city to the rest of the city. They also oftentimes want to be able to download the data and use it in their own ways. And so in addition to all of that, we also wanted to provide a tool that would go beyond the city of Austin boundaries and really the demographic profiles that I showed you are all geographies that really focus on Austin and the larger metro area, but nothing that really falls in between Austin and the metro, right? And then we also wanted to make sure to uphold data integrity standards that can become problematic when you're working at a smaller geography. We know that census tract data from the American Community Survey comes with margins of error, but we also know that a lot of users kind of ignore that because, they see the number, they want the number, and they want to be able to use the number. And oftentimes, there's confusion about how reliable those data can be. And so we wanted to be able to create a tool that was going to provide all of that flexibility. And so that's how the Austin Community Profile Builder was born. And this is what it looks like on the, sort of landing page. And in the next slide, I'm going to play a quick video that'll walk us through what the Austin Community Profile Builder looks like and what it does. And let me see if I can get that running. Let me know if for whatever reason you stay stuck at this Google page, but hopefully it'll run for us. So the Austin Community Profile Builder has its own URL. It's communityprofile.maps.austintexas.gov. Keeping that austintexas.gov URL was important for us. And you can see it takes you to this landing page. We're still in production, and so we have that warning there. But it was created with the City of Austin and Esri using a lot of Esri ACS data from the Census Bureau. But you can see that you can go into the tool and select your own custom geography, either, with any of these, in any of these ways. We can use the square one here to select a few, an area on the map, and you can see that it captures all of the census tracts within that area. We have a lot of the same topics that we have on our demographic profiles: housing unit costs, race, ethnicity, population, households and families, communities of interest, education and employment. And we can take a look here at communities of interest. And, even though we kind of have some text that tells you what those are, you can select any of them or a specific community of interest here by just kind of clicking on the bubble next to it. For the purposes of this demo, I went ahead and collected all of these communities of interest or selected them. And then the tool outputs this report, and you can see at the top that it shows you which census tracts were selected. It has the data for the selected area as well as a comparison to the Austin area. And you can see here that there's a fewer older adults who live alone in this particular area than in Austin. We included that reliability indicator that lets you know if that estimate is reliable or not reliable. And it's also grayed out so that you're able to make that informed decision as to whether you should use that information or not. You can scroll down within the table if it's a longer table, and you can see that you get all of the information here for all of those communities of interest and that comparison as well. When you scroll back to the top, I guess I'm moving a little faster than my demo here. We'll wait for it to play out. But when we go to the top, you can see that you can copy the URL to send and share with someone. You can collapse individual tables. If you're looking at the full demographic profile, you can download the data, and you can also be linked to the ACS data table where these data come from. When you go back to the map, you can see sort of the home page. You can, again, see additional information on how to use the tool. The data and notes section really shows, some of the definitions, some of the reliability issues. It lets you know the different data sources so that data users are well informed of, what information they're getting. You can go back to the map and kind of clear the selection. And we have also additional ways to view the data. So if you want to go to use your location, you can just have it go to your particular area. So here it assumes that I'm at City Hall, even though I'm at the Permitting and Development Center. Or you can also type in your specific address that you're interested in, and it'll, kind of go to that particular area. You can select that particular census tract to get information for that particular area for the address as well. And then you'll get a similar report. You can also go through and select, the characteristics again. I'm going to show you one more thing where it shows you how to kind of view this information in a different way. You can click on the hamburger on the bottom left again to really be able to see the information in a kind of nighttime mode, as well as, oh, and you can also go back into the map and add additional areas. You can kind of select the nighttime mode by clicking the little sun or the little moon there. You can change your base layer by clicking at the top right corner. And then as you scroll into the tool, you can see that it gives you more, sort of roadways and streets to help you navigate and really draw out the geography that you want to get the information for. Again, the information is going to come from the census tracts that are selected, but you can get as specific as you want. And so that's the community profile builder. What we're considering for future versions of this tool would be to include other geographies, right? Like zip codes or particular places, like, if you want to understand, what the demographic profile is for Manor or for Pflugerville, we hope to be able to add that. Allow for multiple comparisons of different geographies, not just to Austin, but let you choose what the comparison is. We also hope to be able to provide some data visualization, some charts to be able to accompany the data. Allow users to select more than just the current year. The data that I showed you right now are all going to be 5-year data from the ACS because it's at the census tract level. And the data that I shared with you is the most recently available data, which is the 2023 ACS 5-year estimates. In December, we'll be updating it to include the 2024 ACS 5-year estimates. And then, we also want to be able to request input from the community to understand, are these the data that you want to see, right? Are these the demographics? Have we included what you're thinking of and what you're interested in learning about your communities? And now I'll briefly touch on the Delphi Trends and Imagine Austin forecast. As many of you probably know, we produce city-level population projections every year. We also produce these projections, going out to 2060 or for a 40-year projections horizon. But as we, started speaking to different staff members, they really identified the need for small area forecasts. They didn't just want to know how much was Austin going to grow out to 2060, but they wanted to know what parts within Austin were going to be the ones that were going to be growing. And so the first DTI forecast was produced in 2012, and then it was updated in 2017. And I'm calling it the DTI forecast, and that's Delphi Trends and Imagine Austin. And so Delphi is kind of the process that we used. The trends are sort of the historical growth trends that we've seen. And then the Imagine Austin is sort of the vision of the forecast, right? City of Austin also identified a need for more consistent forecasts across departments. So prior to the DTI forecast, transportation was doing their own forecast for their, street impact fee analysis. Water was using their own forecast. They were all getting different consultants. And so it was more cost intensive. It was more, inconsistent. And so they really wanted to develop a tool that was more consistent and would help to align the work of different departments across the city. And so once we had the 2020 census data and we were able to update our citywide population projections, we were able to begin this DTI forecast. And so the DTI forecast basically brought together 12 representatives from 12 different departments with knowledge about upcoming growth and development and different, changes in policy. And they came together to really disaggregate those citywide projections into small areas. And so we have a story map collection that you can, link to. We provide the link here so that you can access a report where we kind of highlight some of the key insights. We have a dashboard and a video guide to that dashboard. We also include some maps and some map layers if you want to download the data to use in your own analysis. And then we include the methodology both for the forecast, but also for the population projections and for employment, because this product includes both employment projections and population projections in the forecasts. And so here I kind of draw again on the 4900 Gonzalez Street address, and you can see what it includes is sort of the projected population, the projected job growth. You can see in the table sort of the interval decades between 2020 and 2060. You can't really see it very well on this chart because this particular geography falls fully within the city of Austin boundaries for the most part. But in those areas that are between jurisdictions, you get the share of jobs within the city and outside of the city, and the share of population within the city and outside of the city. And so I just wanted to make you aware of this tool as well, because it is, different from our Austin Community Profile Builder, because it's much more, this tool is, future focused, and the other one is more current day. But I wanted to kind of take the time to share both of those with you today. And then just very quickly, I'll share some of the key insights that we identified as we were reviewing the DTI forecast. And what we find is that Austin's population, even though slower in growth, is still projected to grow by over 300,000 people by 2060. And this will really happen with densification all around the core of the city, but also really expanding farther east. Austin is also projected to add over 500,000 jobs between now and 2060. And much of the growth in jobs is forecasted to occur in already existing job centers. But we also have seen the emergence of new job centers, especially moving farther east all along Highway 130, but also in the Highland area. And then we did a kind of a highlight of a couple of areas within the city that have a lot of infrastructure, going on, or future infrastructure development. And so, for instance, one of those areas was the Project Connect light rail corridor. That area is forecasted to grow by nearly 100,000 with increased density. And so you can see that area is really forecasted to make up about a third of the entire growth that we'll see in the city of Austin between now and 2060. And that's what I put together for you today. I'm happy to take some questions. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so I can see all of you and see if there's any questions.
Wow, that's amazing work. I mean, just one of those projects in and of itself, it's a heavy lift. But and I'm really excited about the community profile builder. Thank you for thinking to do that. But I know it, again, those kind of requests come all the time when you're, serving, 10 council districts and, a lot of stakeholder groups and neighborhood associations, et cetera, et cetera. And I do think the zip code, addition would be super useful, because as you know, when we try to look at data disaggregated by race and ethnicity, a lot of times at the census tract level or even group level, right? You don't have the reliability you want, but at the zip code level, a lot of times that's large enough where you can compare some of these demographics with high degree of reliability. So I do think that'd be a great addition. A lot of the things you talk about, it's so forward looking. It's very appreciative of the approach, and let us know what you need from us, right? Going forward around that. But I always have lots of questions, but I'll see if anybody has other questions. I know Ara asked in the chat about, the implications for the loss of historical and future federally sourced data, right? And I know we've kind of been fearful of of our data that we get. So I know Carlos in that first very early months of 2025 was downloading a bunch of stuff, not knowing when it was gonna kind of come back or and some of these sites are down right now because of the shutdown. So we're now fearful of, well, will they be turned back on? Like, is it as easy to turn it back on as it was for you to turn it off, right? But anything more than we might, right, about that. But obviously, it's a concern not to have access to some of this very critical information.
Yeah, happy to answer that question. And it looks like there's a couple of questions related to, sort of data access in the chat. So one of the things that I was traveling with a friend for her birthday in January of 2025, or January 2025, and I came back there to the news that there was no data available on the data.census.gov and lots of other websites during that first phase where they were pulling a lot of data. And during that time, we really got together with demographers across the country to really try to understand what is going on. We need to start to download our own data, make copies of the data. We have been able to find some workarounds, and this is part of the community profile builder for us was sort of the democratization of data to really make sure that people of all data proficiencies could get access to data about their neighborhoods, their communities. And so when we were looking at the issues of data access, then something that we found was that really it's about impeding the access to already packaged data sources. So data.census.gov is down, but the API is still up. And so if you are a coder and you can take that data from the API, you still have access to the data. Now, obviously, they could start to, take, steps to prevent access to the API. But during that time, other demographers around the state also started to download data. And so we made the decision to not do our team, like I mentioned, is a team of 5. We decided we did not have the resources to download all of this data, and it doesn't make sense for all of us to do that. But it does make sense to make sure that we know what data are available and who has it, who's cataloging it, and who's keeping a close inventory. So maybe at a future meeting, I can share some of the resources that we found, because there are groups that are maintaining their own copies of current data, historical data, and as soon as new data are released, they're getting their own copies so that they don't have to rely on, or go through the volatility of one day it's there, another day it's not. One day it's one number, another day it's a different number. And so, I'm happy to share. We started collecting links of all of those resources because there's lots of scholars all across the country who are making sure that we have access to those data.
Well, thank you. That's very reassuring, because obviously our interest at CAN as well. Can we continue to publish the dashboard? So luckily Carlos knows which tables do we draw from, and we download again those very specific ones. So happy to share with you kind of what we have, because we'll share it, like anybody who asks for it, whatever historical data we have, we'll share it. And some indicators are newer than others, right? So we can go back further on some indicators and others. But thank you for that, because it is so important, and I do think it's something to keep an eye on and just be al tanto, as I don't know how you say that in English, be on the ready, or be ready, and be diligent, I guess, and vigilant and diligent. How about that? But anyway, any other questions? I don't want to shortchange Dr. Valencia on the questions. A couple more. We'll